We are in a phase where the foundations themselves are unsettled. We are not merely adjusting to new rules, we are watching the rules being rewritten. A world disrupted, Australia in global reordering.
The global order is now permanently changed. There is no going back. The only certainty is now uncertainty.
Hi, and welcome to this episode of the AIIA's Indo-Pacific briefing, where it's our mission to help Australians know, understand, and engage more in international affairs. The Institute's National Conference is Australia's leading event on Australian foreign policy. The conference is a gathering of academics, practitioners, and experts who have shaped policies in Australia and the world. This year's conference meets under the banner A World Disrupted: Australia and Global Reordering.
The arrival of the second Trump administration has ushered in a set of dynamics that are more pointed, more chaotic, and more consequential than before. We're witnessing the dismantling of global trade norms, a loosening of US commitments to multilateral systems. These are not simply shifts in tone. They are arguably shifts in order. And they demand that we think more seriously than ever before about what global order means, what it will become, and how Australia might both adapt to and influence the systems that are emerging.
First and foremost, Australia is a great nation, but not a great power like China or the United States. We, like Singapore, like other countries with significant GDP, depend on the rules-based international order in order to secure our security geopolitically and our economic prosperity.
What we didn't foresee was the extent of the United States' commitment and speed to start a trade war, to retreat from the post-war international order.
For 7 decades, Australia benefited profoundly from a system often assumed to be largely built and underwritten by the United States. But the emerging landscape will likely not look like the post-war order, nor like the unipolar moment, nor even like the first Trump presidency.
Just the amount of change that we're seeing on a global level, I think, and as well, geopolitically, economically, technologically as well, with the rise of AI, misinformation.
The world Australia faces is increasingly undemocratic, grievance-driven, aggressively interventionist, and multipolar. Our fear of abandonment, as Alan Gyngell described so well, has never been more palpable.
Who participates in shaping the next order? What values will it reflect? How will middle powers coordinate to prevent a drift into unmanaged rivalry? And how can Australia help ensure that the emerging system is one in which openness, sovereignty, and prosperity can survive?
We are not without agency. Australia's stable political system, Westminster system of government, our proximity to an enmeshment in the fastest growing region of the world, a sound financial sector and macroeconomic frameworks, including a flexible exchange rate, has enabled the economy over several decades to adjust to crises.
I think the social license is lost where the outcomes of something like AUKUS conflict with what the public sees as being in Australia's national interests. I think for the moment, Australia's social license holds because the government does articulate a case for why its particular investments are in the national interest.
I feel personally invested in a lot to do with Europe, free trade agreements, and that's partly because of my background, but I also think it's a good counterbalance to over-dependence perhaps on the US and also as a counter to China.
I think it was John Curtin who realized the British were not coming to help us during the time Japan was on our doorsteps, and then realized the United States, it's time to turn a leaf and go to the United States. And I think now is the same time where we keep the relationship with the United States as it is a major power, but we also focus on engaging with the Asian countries within Southeast Asia.
We have, I guess, an outsized ego in terms of our relationship with the US. Like, I come and go out of Washington, and, you know, we are trusted to an extent. We're nice to have, we're great mates, but we don't factor in as much as we think we do into US defense planning or strategic thought.
The second Trump administration and this wobble that the world has felt has given an opportunity for Australian-British relations, that, you know, everybody to look at this with new eyes. And we see this as a really important opportunity, both in terms of infrastructure, transport and infrastructure, energy transition, and indeed defence, where there's a huge amount of expertise, mobility and opportunity.
You look at the Southeast Asia strategy produced by Nicholas Moore, but endorsed by the government and being actioned. You look at increased engagement with partners and friends, Canada, the United Kingdom and so forth. And we've been pleased to see the results of Ambassador Rudd's efforts, especially in Washington. That's all very positive. We're also pleased to see that we have improved relations with China, and that trade, which is such a big part of our capacity to do well as an economy, continues to feature. But we really do stress that in order for us to manage this uncertainty as much as possible, we've got to concentrate on those economic fundamentals here at home. That's how we bring investment into our country. That's how we'll do well into the future.
Every step, working in partnership with the region and through ASEAN and the Pacific Islands Forum, which underpin our collective security and prosperity.
Look, I think the region is very diverse. We used to have a sense that we were a bit of the odd man out in Asia, but I think we're very normal in the Indo-Pacific. There's a whole range of countries with a whole range of backgrounds. Australia has things to offer, and I think as long as we come with a sense of humility, understanding that the countries around us have grown in importance and strength, then I think we can be a very good partner for the region.
If there's a big test, the opportunity to leverage diaspora in the years ahead, it is of course the big market of India, where we've seen significant growth in that population in Australia, a significant growth in two-way movement of people between our countries, and a real opportunity without some of the legal language or other barriers to really be able to try to leverage the diaspora in that relationship.
Look, the Australia-India relationship has only really taken off in the last decade. In the last 5 years, we've moved our relationship to a comprehensive strategic partnership. And that is really what's defined us being two middle powers in this region that really want to work together to solve some of the shared challenges that our region faces, whether it's climate change, maritime security, or economic cooperation. We're an island continent. We're surrounded by two oceans, or three oceans, in fact. So, you know, for India, you can understand why, in a sense, it's taken a position of non-alignment, that it doesn't have any formal alliances with any one dominant country. That allows it to really ensure, I think, that India can play a more autonomous and independent role in how it addresses some of the challenges it has, China being one of them. Education is our strongest economic relationship with India. Now we have thousands of Indian students here in Australia, and now we have Australian universities setting up campuses in India. So education will continue to play a huge role because nearly half of India's population is under the age of 24 and they want to be educated.
Everybody's got an issue in terms of skills gaps. I think the important thing is that we don't get into a situation where we're sort of actively poaching. I think we really need to look at our universities, invest in the right programs, and encourage young people to look to these sorts of sectors as real opportunities and secure careers going forward.
I think there's a lot of things happening in the Indo-Pacific. One of them is Australia's relationship with the Pacific Islands, per se. Well, we really, I think, need to ensure that we know where we're going in terms of how we produce power in Australia. That's one of the main things. And having a long-term view in terms of renewables or other types of energy use is really important, because unless we are able to achieve that long-term goal, we'll be flip-flopping.
So in Canada, over 50% of all renewable projects have some form of Indigenous co-investment. So over 50%. In Australia, that number is less than 1%. You can literally count the number of projects which have some form of Indigenous co-investment on your two hands. The projects that have Indigenous co-investment actually present as much less risk and profile and much more greater certainty and time frame. If you leave those Indigenous interests with legal and property rights to the tail end of the development pipeline, it is an invitation for dispute and for contest and for lawyers to get involved.
Well, it's critical for Australia that our financial system, our banking system, remains as it is, one of the most safe and secure in the world, and that is to Australia's advantage in terms of the stability of doing business here, the attractiveness and reassurance of Australia being a safe and secure place. But it is also essential that we don't, in managing risk, curtail growth. And that is where the balance needs to be gotten right.
But I think there's a problem, is where's the money going to come from when we need the hospitals and the schools? And I think politically that is a very difficult situation. I think it's sad that the whole world is having to defend its, having to spend more on defence. We've just heard from Heather Smith, who has been involved in the intelligence review, that we have to be vigilant. Worse than aggression is giving in to aggression. So we have to have the capabilities to stand up to any aggression.
First of all, it needs to have a very stable economy, something that we have in Australia, but we also need to make sure that our economy is diversified and our economy responds to these new frontiers of knowledge that we see through artificial intelligence and synthetic biology. Second, it needs to have a proactive defense and foreign policy. Diplomacy is really important in that period of geopolitical upheaval, but also having a strong defense base is extremely important. And third, I think we really need to make sure that our society is resilient and coherent.
Well, look, Australia has the largest maritime area in the world in that sense. We have a huge area to patrol and take care of.
So perhaps the Southern Ocean that for many years was, and Antarctica for that matter, which was seen as somewhat unique and free from broader geopolitical forces, they're certainly there now, but still being managed. There's not a crisis yet, but it could well be. Pressure points increasing, if you like, cracks in the ice appearing.
Look, as a young person in the 21st century, I feel like climate change is a really, really big topic. It's really, I really like how the media has kind of started talking about it recently with the headlines and everything, but I feel like there's still a lot more work to do because it is such a serious issue and it impacts all of us. Look, it's truly disheartening. I feel like everything around the globe at the moment, especially with Sudan, Palestine, Ukraine, so many things going on. It is really disheartening, but I feel like when you're in Australia, you feel like you have an opportunity to kind of make a difference and to advocate for people who perhaps don't have that voice and don't have that opportunity to do so. So you really have to take this like seriously. You're like, okay, well, I'm here when they can't be, so I need to do better so that they can be heard.
Well, I identify first and foremost as an Australian. I've spent the majority of my life living here, but I was born in Malaysia. I'm a Chinese ethnically. And migrated to Australia via Papua New Guinea. And certainly in the late 80s and early 90s, I did struggle with my identity as a Malaysian Chinese person. I first and foremost identified as Malaysian culturally, and then as I got older, more Chinese. and now as I've come into my adulthood as an Australian.
Now it's about what are people using in technology to create micro chat rooms, micro communications that are beyond the reach of mainstream media and indeed can be very unhealthy in many occasions.
What I think is interesting is the way in which some political campaigns and politicians used deep fakes or soft fakes, if it's of yourself and it's approved, soft fakes is the term, to campaign. So I think Prime Minister Modi in India was probably the most famous example of using satirical deep fakes to reach a young audience through the course of his campaign. He made fun of himself through fakes to actually great success.
So far, those divisions are really on the margins or on the surface of our society. So it's really a big job for our political, business, as well as community leaders to explain and put sort of really creative messaging about what unites us.
My mom is Uyghur and my dad is Chinese, so I kind of grew up in a very multicultural household. And I think Australians tend to have a very black or white perspective towards everything that's about China. So that's why I think, we need a more grassroots perspective and like more people to people kind of understanding between the young generations of China and Australia.
The disruption, the contest, is permanent. China will continue trying to reshape the region according to its own interests.
When I went to Kenya, there's a major highway out there. I don't know if it was constructed by the Chinese, but for some reason in Nairobi, you feel like you're in China just because of the construction.
2013 to 2014, actually, Russia invaded Ukraine for the first time. And the reason they did it was that they really wanted to grab Crimea. They wanted to undermine Ukraine, and they made an incursion, and there was a war. It was a big war. But the appeasement which happened after that emboldened Putin to come up with a bigger war to take over Ukraine entirely. In the world of the jungle, Australia and other countries of the region have no chance of survival.
The defense of Australia or any other country for that matter is not only based on, the hardware that you have, but also on diplomacy. It's very, very important.
We thought we painted a rather stark strategic picture of the world Australia faces, one more volatile, one more fragmented and more contested, and how these threats were being amplified by technological change. We said we faced a dangerous international environment and a growing need to defend ourselves against threats to democracy, social cohesion, and essential infrastructure.
The strength of our democracy, the trust in our institutions, are central to navigating a world more divided, more contested, and more insecure. And so is our economic strength. Our strength that enables us to influence, to engage, to resource the strategic action we need to take. You see, this confidence in ourselves and this strength in our democracy can serve to deter anyone that seeks to undermine us. And the more we can do to reassure and reinforce stability across our region, the more we remind the world of the peace and the prosperity we stand to lose. So what does success look like? I tell you what success looks like for me. A stronger and more influential Australia, connected in our region and respected in the world, where we know who we are, what we want, and where we are going.
This has been Indo-Pacific Briefing at the AIIA's National Conference. We've just heard Foreign Minister Penny Wong outline her vision for a stronger, more influential Australia. It's a vision about connecting to our region and respect in the world. Thank you for watching.